I am so excited to dive into today's episode, but before we do, I want to share something huge I've been working on, and that is a free 10-day email course answering your questions about extreme hunger. As someone who's been through it firsthand and has coached many through this challenging part of recovery, I've taken the top 10 questions I get asked about extreme hunger and broken them down into daily emails filled with science, stories, and practical guidance. So, whether you're constantly thinking about food, confused about why you feel hungry after having gained weight, or just want to better understand the complex intersection between autism and hunger cues, this course will help you make sense of what you or your loved one may be experiencing. The best part is it is completely free, so you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. You can get access right away by visiting the link livlabelfree.com/extreme-hunger-guide, or just click the link in the show notes for your ease. And now let's dive into today's episode.
Gotta put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be around the corner soon.
Welcome to the Liv Label Free Podcast, where we talk about autism, ADHD, eating disorders, existentialism, and everything in between. I'm your host, Livia Sara. Now let's get into it. Hello, and welcome back to the Liv Label Free Podcast. I'm your host, Livia Sara, and today I am joined by Ashleigh Marie Hubbard, a certified nutrition and health coach who's passionate about helping people build sustainable habits and improve their relationship with food, exercise, and their bodies. So, Ashleigh, do you want to elaborate on that one-liner for us and tell our audience who they'll be listening to today?
Yes. So hello. Thank you for having me, by the way. I've been doing, nutrition coaching, health coaching for almost a decade at this point. I kind of got into it like by accident. So I started being, obsessed. Funny because we're talking about obsession in this podcast. I was very obsessed with the gym at a very young age, and it had a lot of positive things about it, and it transported me into lots of positive things in my life. But one of those things was like competing in Olympic weightlifting and competing in CrossFit and powerlifting. Like I was doing everything I could and like trying to be the best I could be and just really going like 0 to 100. Like if I'm doing something, I'm going to the absolute umpteenth degree with it. And so I got into those sports. And if you know anything about weightlifting and powerlifting, they are weight class sports. And so there were times where to be more competitive, I had a goal to like drop a weight class or 2 or 3. And so I did so. And that kind of got me into tracking my food and tracking calories. And those are tools, I think anything in the world can be demonized, and tracking is one of those things, but it has a good time and a place for people. And that's just the way that I was losing weight. I was using that method. And when that happened, I had like a really huge transformation, got lots of like comments from people, had lots of people asking me what I was doing. And honestly, that's kind of how I started coaching, because I had so many people bombarding me with like what I was doing, and they would see me like eating certain things and they're like, oh, you're allowed to eat that, or like whatever. It was just like crazy. So I was like, why don't I just coach people myself? Because I was getting so many questions from people and I liked the process of it. I was very intrigued by just like the science and by what felt like a really cool experiment with my own body. And I've learned a lot along the way. Like I was not a perfect coach back then. I was only 18 when I started, and I'll be 28 in like less than a month. That's kind of how I just like launched myself into coaching. But my whole premise around coaching is I want it to be sustainable, and everyone has different goals, and the media likes to showcase like fad diets and crash dieting and heavily restricted things. And those things aren't sustainable, as we see, because these people go back to these diets over and over again because they thought they worked the first time. And the reality is they didn't, because they didn't teach you anything about how to eat or how to change your lifestyle for that matter. And so the way that I work with people is obviously it's very different per person because it's very individual and customized to their lifestyle. And I like to coach people in a way that it makes things feel less stressful. Like food should not be this stress that we think about 24/7. Food in our body should not be on our minds 24/7. And I think that feels impossible to some people. So the way that I coach people is to get them to a place where they can reach their goals, but without being obsessive about food in their body.
Yeah, I'm like frantically taking notes here because what you said about, first of all, how you kind of just landed into coaching by accident. We have a very similar journey in that respect. But yeah, I mean, so first of all, I wanted to say that I think it's awesome how you turned your own journey into this business and this coaching that you do now. And our ages are pretty similar. I'm 3 years younger than you. I didn't start coaching when I was 15. I started my business when I was 19 or 20. So around the same age, which it's young. They say it's young, but I think it's awesome. And then, yeah, I mean, also with you being obsessed with the gym at a young age, totally relatable for me as well. Anyone who's read my book, Rainbow Girl, knows that a huge part of my identity growing up was, I was the athlete. I was the fit one. I was the healthy one. And I think for me, healing from my exercise addiction, which we'll get into in a moment, a huge component of that was disentangling this sense of I that I had created for myself from these external gym, sports, the healthy one, the one that can like avoid sweets and have no remorse. That was just who I was. But I think when we tie ourselves up in an identity that we don't need, like that's when we lose ourselves. And that's ultimately, the whole philosophy of Liv Label Free is like, you're never going to find yourself in something else. And the all or nothing mindset, I think that I know that you don't have like a neurodivergent diagnosis or anything like that. But I remember when you first bought my book and you reached out to me and you said, I've been thinking about this piece for so long because of that all or nothing thing. And I mean, I often think about black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking or whatever you want to call it. And I think the purpose of it ultimately for our brains is that it gives our brains something tangible to hold on to. Because if it's either this or that and nothing in between, we can clearly comprehend this or that. But if you tell me, go look at everything, like just go look at everything, like what? Like that doesn't, because the brain cannot grasp that. And I think in that sense, it's an adaptation. It's a mental adaptation is to think in black and white because it's a way to conserve energy almost. And then when you add the restriction and all of that, I think it just takes it to another level because you're literally being deprived. So I wanted to ask you how do you feel like you healed your relationship with exercise? Because you kind of made a jump from, I was super obsessed, I was tracking, which I want to get into why that's not always a bad thing. And then you kind of jumped into it and I started coaching and now I've been doing this coaching for 10 years. But I'm assuming that you now have a healthy relationship with exercise and food in your body. So when did that shift for you? Or what were some pivotal moments in your life where you realized, oh, I really can't this isn't sustainable. I can't keep doing this anymore.
Yeah. So when I was competing, so at the age of like 17, I lost my period. And that was mostly just obviously from being undernourished and losing a lot of weight really quickly. And so from the age of 17 until 21, I actually didn't have a period. And I didn't care. Like, honestly, when I was training for performance, when I was trying to just like be the best I could be, like, and also during this time I was very much heavily obsessed with exercise, but I didn't have a cycle and I didn't care because I was like, I know why this is happening. And if I want to get it back, I know how to get it back. I was just too stubborn to gain weight to do so because I was very like you, like my identity was very much so like what I looked like, how I performed. I was the fit girl, especially after the really big like physical transformation that I had. all of the comments. Like I knew that if I gained weight, it's like if I was seen in public, it's like, oh, she like lost her way, like she gained it all back or something like that. Like I just had so much like anxiety about that. So my kind of breaking point was I had gotten so burnt out with what I was doing. I was very robotic. Like I just did the same thing every single day. I ate the same thing every single day. Like I was just training for hours and hours and hours. Everything I cared about was just sleep, food, training, repeat. I was very moody all the time. I would like snap at my parents all the time. I didn't know what anxiety was then, but I was definitely like a very hyper, high strung, anxious person. I just wasn't aware of it until I friggin' broke down. So that was kind of like that breaking point of like, okay, I need to get my health back. I need to start working towards like getting my period back and just like being healthier. Like, because I had the hormones of a postmenopausal woman at that time, and I was 20. So like
Yeah.
not good.
I relate to the period thing a lot. I mean, I didn't get my first period until I was 18 because my eating disorder started when I was 11. And I'm like, yeah, if you don't give a plant water, it's not going to grow. So if you don't give a human enough food, it's not going to grow. And so from age 11 to age 17, because my breaking point was when I was 17. And I was like, I was burnt out from all the routines too and all the rules. And I'd like to talk about also like exercise burnout in a bit, because for me, I knew for years exactly what I had to change. I knew I wanted to change, but for me, it was always fear. I can't handle the change. A huge piece specifically tied to exercise was if I take a break from exercising, if I stop doing this, well, then I'm going to turn into a couch potato. I'm never going to have the motivation to work out ever again. Because I'm in this flow now. And because I started to hate it so much, I was like, yeah, there's no way that I can ever like this again. And then the irony, the catch 22 is like, well, keeping to do it isn't going to make you suddenly enjoy it. But again, it's like that fear of the unfamiliar that the human brain wants to avoid at all costs. It's why the black and white thinking comes in, because everything that is in the gray zone, or what I like to call the colorful nuance, it's unknown, it's unfamiliar. And I'm like, yeah, of course it's unfamiliar because you've never done it before. And I think for healing from any kind of, limitation, it's about giving yourself permission to discover. And you cannot give yourself that permission to discover unless you accept the possibility and the inevitability that you're gonna make mistakes and that things are gonna happen that you don't like. But as long as you're not willing to confront that void, like you might as well go back to bed, is what I like to say. So, yeah, I know I kind of interrupted there, but I thought it was important to add that, especially regarding the period piece, because I think for me, I just didn't want a period either. Like I knew I needed it to be healthy, but I didn't want to have to deal with that. Because for me, a lot of the fear of weight gain and stuff was also just rooted in not wanting to feel my body, not like because I've always felt trapped in my own body. And for me, the excessive exercise, the restriction, it was just all numbing. And I knew that if I got my period back with all the hormones that come with that, like, don't even get me started. I knew that I didn't want that and that was going to be hard. But again, it's that like, I hate this quote, but it's like choose your hard. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, I totally like I resonate completely with that. And I think that it's funny too, because I actually started my period when I was 10. I was so young when I
Oh,
started my
so
period.
yeah, like way earlier than me.
Yeah. And I was like, I remember it was like I was like so terrified. I was like, I don't want to grow up. But I hated it. And so when I was trying to get it back, of course, like I had this dire fear of weight gain. Like honestly, I would have rather died at that point than gain weight, probably. I just had this huge fear of it because of all of that like identity rooted stuff. And also I just didn't want to like I liked how I looked, but like at the same time I didn't because I was still very hypercritical of myself. Like I always wanted more. I was always chasing more, leaner, stronger, like whatever. And then when I got it back to kind of go along with what you were saying about like that like surge of hormones. Oh yeah, that was awful. And like I was saying, I didn't realize I was anxious. Like my body showed me that I was anxious. Like when I started getting this surge of all of these hormones now, like that was when I first started experiencing like my first panic attack. And that was terrible. I thought I was dying. And so then I feel like that situation after I got, quote, healthier from getting my period back, I feel like ever since then, I've been on this, like, it feels like I'm a different person. Not necessarily in a good way or bad way, just like different. Like, just all of these like realizations, like with my mental health and like all of this stuff. And I guess it has to do with the fact that for so many years, I was suppressing things, I was numbing myself. Because, like you said, that numbness, like it feels good. Like it feels good to just feel numb and empty and depleted because then you don't have the energy to like worry about things. You're just like so like dead to everything. And so for me, like when it comes to exercise addiction, I like any addiction, like I was very in denial about that. Very in denial that it was a problem. I like to use the excuse of, well, it's for competition. And like that's
Yeah.
true, but it's still an addiction and it's still unhealthy if it's like taking over every aspect of your life
Mm-hmm.
and not in a positive way. So for me, it was like that was the only way I knew how to cope with stress. So like I could do my training for the day, but like I always needed more of it. Like I always needed to get that whatever hormonal neurotransmitter release I got when I would exercise. Like
Yeah.
I needed more and more and more. And so when we do that, like with any addiction, like the more that you do something, you kind of need more of it to produce that same effect. And so it just gets into like a really tricky territory. But because that was like all I knew with like how to quiet my brain, which was really not just quieting it, it was just like avoiding whatever I was feeling at the moment. So I guess to pull myself out of that, like I've been through therapy. I don't love therapy. I'm not like
That's me neither.
but I also feel like I could just be my own therapist at this point because
Yeah.
I always they're gonna say. And I don't know.
That's actually
That's a
so
whole
funny.
other topic.
That's so funny you just mentioned that because I mean, I love like therapists. Like I have so many neurodivergent therapist friends who went into therapy because they wanted to be like the person that they didn't have. And I think especially in the context of autism and just the lack of understanding around that, I think it's so important, especially that we have people who are affirming and allies of neurodivergence and understanding the eating issues and the complexities of that. But with I always know what they're gonna say thing. I wasn't in therapy since like 2018. And that's when I was in treatment for my eating disorder. And I mean, when you're in treatment for your eating disorder, like that is hardcore. Like you're like in like 5+ hours of therapy a day for months. So you get like therapy burnout at some point. You're like, I don't want to see a fucking therapist for like the next 10 years. But last year, yeah, because we're already in 2025. In 2024, I was having like so much burnout, anxiety, panic attack. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to a therapist. And I went like 3 times, but every single time I was like, every next question, I knew exactly what he was gonna say. And I like would say it in my head, like, he's gonna ask me this. And sure enough, and I'm like, this is not helpful, especially when you can like read right through them. But I think in that sense, therapy is kind of like dating. It's like you need to find the right one. But it's also to a point of like, if you know how to coach yourself, like do that. And now, time for a quick ad break. I so hope you're loving this episode with Ashleigh because I definitely am. If you've gained any insights from the Liv Label Free podcast, could you do me a super quick favor and leave a 5-star rating and positive review for this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below. I love to hear from you as it makes this podcast more of a conversation. And if you're wanting to dive even deeper into the topics of exercise addiction, embracing your neurodivergent identity beyond an eating disorder, and making peace with food in a way that works with your unique being, check out my books at livlabelfreebooks.com. So that's Liv Label Free, like the name of this podcast, books.com. Or just click the link in the show notes as ever. I hope to see you on the page later, and now let's get back to today's episode with Ashleigh.
Well, I feel like I always would get to a point where I'm like, okay, this is really expensive. And I feel like I already, like, because for me, when like, it's more just like action based because I'm already someone where I'm always looking
Yes.
for why I'm feeling a certain way. I'm always looking for like, I'm an intellectualizer.
Yep.
And so like, whenever I'm having a conversation with a therapist, they're like, oh, you're really self-aware. And I'm like, I know.
I'm like, no
Help.
shit, Sherlock.
I'm like, so like, what do I do? So like, I've
Yeah.
found that like more action-based approaches or like, I don't know, like, I don't know if I'm just looking for someone to like put a gun in my head and make me do something, but like, because I can't do that. But I don't know. I feel like for some people, it's really helpful. For me, I tend to just like get to a point where I'm like, okay, is this really helpful, or do I just like talking? I don't know.
I
But
totally feel you on the action piece, because that's honestly what I love so much about coaching, and that's why even though I haven't gone to therapy for a long time, like I have had a lot of coaches in the past few years: business coaching, nervous system coaching, book coaching, author coaching, mindset coaching. Because for me, I'm like you, I want to learn something and then I'm like, okay, and now I want to implement it. Like I don't want to just learn it and then not do anything with it. And this I love that you mentioned, I always need to know why. That is like one of the top neurodivergent traits is like we do not do anything. We do not accept anything. We do not take anything at face value unless the person or source telling us can tell us also this is why. This is scientifically founded. This has this evidence to back it up. Because otherwise I'm like, yeah, you need to convince me. And you convince me by giving me evidence. And there's another phrase that I use a lot in the context of neurodivergence, and that is, everything for me has to have a point. I do not do anything unless there's like a specific outcome I'm chasing. And I think for me, that is part of the anxiety and being so high strung all the time. It's like, I can't just lay on the beach and relax because for me, that's absolutely pointless. And where am I going with this? Oh, yeah, with the coaching piece, for me, if I know I'm doing this because it's going to help me take action that I want to take, I'm like, yep, that has a total purpose. But for me, with like therapy, it's just like, oh, yeah, we're just going to talk about your feelings. I'm like, yeah, but what's the point of that? And like sometimes they can give a really clear point of like, oh, well, then you discover this and then it makes that easier. But then I'm like, I almost feel like so many good therapists are also like kind of coaches in a way. But then it's like the whole label thing. It's like, where are we even going with this semantic soup?
Mhm. Yeah, I totally get it. And I think it depends on if you're the type of person that kind of like self searches that stuff out anyway, because like that's what I do on the internet.
Yeah.
Some people maybe just don't do that, and so they rely on the therapist to like help them kind of sort through what they're
Hmm.
feeling. I just always feel like I have to get to the bottom of something. If someone says something and I don't know the answer, I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up. Like I'm gonna
Tell me
find that.
why. Yeah, I mean, the amount of times that I will like discover something and I have like over 600, like reminders in my reminders app that have the most random search queries that I don't want to like look up in the moment. So I'll park
Yeah.
them for later. But like I'm pulling up the notes right now and let's see. Yeah, just like random thoughts I have about, okay, look up the connection between autoimmunity and autism, and maybe you can write a book about that. Like that's literally one of my notes from 2023.
That's
So it's
so
not
funny.
like I go through them, but it's like it has to be out of my brain because otherwise I'm going to ruminate on it until it's out of my brain.
Good idea. It's a good strategy. I like.
But yeah, so you were talking about feeling like a different person now that, you have healed from exercise addiction and all that, which is so true. Like even for me, when I talk about, the little Livia who was obsessed with calorie counting, and I was always setting a new precedent for the exercise. And I love that you touched on that. Because for me, if I say like I was going to do 20 push-ups, but then I lost count and then I'd be like, okay, well, now we're going to do 25. But now that we've done 25,
Mhm.
tomorrow we can't do less than 25. And it would always be more and more. And yeah, what you said about the satisfaction piece with addictions, it's like you always have more hunger for the next hit, so to say.
Mhm.
And I think that's what ultimately for a lot of people causes disordered eating or dieting or anything like that to spiral into just full blown obsession addiction is because it's never enough. And a lot of that just has to do with the nature of the ego. Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now and A New Earth, he has this amazing quote in his book. It's so simple, but it's the ego wants to want more than it wants to have. And I actually unpack that quote in one of my books. And I say, what this means is that no matter what you achieve, even if you think that's going to be the last milestone, it's never going to be enough because your brain is designed to not actually want to have things, but it wants to always keep wanting things. And if you add, the black and white thinking and, I'm going full in on this and I'm not stopping until I've gotten what I wanted. Well, if you mix that with what I just said, it's like you're just putting yourself on this hamster wheel that literally has no end. And I think getting yourself off it does require for a lot of people that point of I just can't fucking do this anymore. Come hell or high water. But this is no life. And that word again that you brought up before, which I love, is this is not sustainable. That was for me, one of the things was the prospect of doing this forever and ever. I was like, no freaking way. No way. So once you did really start to heal yourself and heal your relationship with exercise and you were doing coaching at the same time, what would you say were some of the biggest insights or key mindset shifts that you made and that you maybe help your clients make too when it comes to, building this healthy relationship with yourself on a holistic level?
Yeah, so it was very hard. I'm not gonna lie, it was very, very hard. I think looking back, I was a little bit depressed when I started to reduce my exercise. And I mean, some of that can be natural, if we think about chemically, we're not getting as much of that dopamine. But I think the biggest thing for me was just finding things outside of what I was doing to have as new hobbies or just explore different things. I never did anything outside really of CrossFit, of weightlifting. My whole life revolved around it. My friends were involved in it. My whole everything was wrapped up in that world. And so I really remember getting really into hiking and just being in nature. I think because it was so grounding for me and I didn't need to be on my phone. So I just had to try different things and try to actually figure out what the heck I liked and who I was, which honestly is still a journey. I still struggle with my identity to this day.
Oh, I'm happy you brought that up because I'm anyone who says this is who I am, I'm oh, you clearly don't know who you are because the self at its core is an illusion. We're not going into that philosophy rabbit hole, but and our identity is ever changing. And I think that's why it's so important to adopt this mindset of, I never, ever, ever will have anything fully figured out. Because the moment you think you do, you're in an illusion. You're in a trap.
Yeah, I feel like I don't feel like we're ever gonna just arrive, at this perfection. I still have really bad days. I still have phases where those old kind of coping mechanisms come back. I mean, it's with anything. It's just that exercise and food tend to be a little bit more socially acceptable to be obsessed with. So it's easy for it to fly under the radar when it's happening. And so I think the biggest thing was just finding things outside of that to do and to have more hobbies and to fill my time with those things because I had so much of my time filled with just being in the gym and working out, being around that atmosphere, that once I took that away or reduced it, I had all this extra time, which I did put more of time into my business, which again can be another obsession of mine, is just working on that and working on myself. So I have to watch myself with that and remember to rest and not overwork. But I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just a dopamine chaser. I don't know. But I just feel it's ever changing and I still am working on that identity piece and figuring out who I am literally still to this day. But I think the biggest thing would probably just be to do other things, experiment with different hobbies, realize that your identity is not rooted in just one thing. And it also doesn't I don't even know what is identity? I don't know. But I don't know, what is life? What is the meaning of life? So
well,
yeah,
I think I think it's really powerful what you just said, where you took a pause and you were like, what even is identity? And I noticed you almost like, I need to have an answer right now. The amount of times that, I mean, this is why podcasts always give me anxiety, is because I know someone's going to be listening to this. But I love what just happened. I loved that you couldn't come up with an answer because there isn't one. And I think that just shows how aware you are. Because if you had an answer, I'd be like, oh, here we have again with a know-it-all who thinks they know what identity is. But identity, like I said, like the self, it's an illusion. It's whatever we make of it. And I think that's why it's so easy to get wrapped up in, I am an athlete, I am the healthy one, I am the fit one, because in that way we are attempting to give ourselves a definition, but we will always fail because the human being cannot be defined by language, by words, by all these external things that we think we fit into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean it's like that saying, I don't know if you've ever heard it, where it's like we're human beings, not human doings.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, like if someone says, oh, hey, like introduce yourself, it's like, hi, like, and you immediately go to like what you do and what your job is. And it's like, I don't know, like I feel like in order to answer that question better, more properly, and like for people just to like understand themselves better, is like think about kids when you're introducing yourself. Like they don't have a job. They're just like, oh, hey, I'm Jimmy. Like I like playing with cars. But we don't have any hobbies. Like as we get older, like maybe that's why everyone's so anxious and depressed. Like we're just not being kids anymore. Like we don't have any hobbies. We don't rest. We don't relax. We don't have fun. And so honestly, this is kind of something that we can maybe touch on like later when we're talking about food and like whatever, but having more like fun and play in your life has been something that's helped a lot of my clients that struggle with emotional eating, because food tends to be a really big pleasure source for people that don't have a lot of fun and pleasure in their life. And so having playtime, like I color. I'm 20, almost 28. I color, guys.
Well, I think again, this idea of like this almost disclaimer of I'm 28 and I color. I'm like, this is only, taboo is not the right word, but like frowned upon only because of the identity that society has given, like someone who colors must have the identity of a young person or a person under 13. That's the only acceptable identity to have. Like, but this is again where the self and the whole identity thing is an illusion, because like who made this up? And I think with food too, something that I talk about so much with my neurodivergent clients is this idea that everything you believe about food, 99% of it is probably just due to the identity that society has told you matches what you have to do to eat. Like even the whole 3 meals, like so many snacks thing, someone made that up. Like the idea
is made up.
We're all just made up. Like pancakes are a breakfast food. Well, in Holland, where I'm from, they're actually a dinner food. So I'm like, yeah. So I love that you say that about the coloring and the fun, because I agree with you. And you saw me smile when you said, now, that I've healed my relationship with exercise, I can get really focused on my work. And I think in a lot of ways, I believe for myself personally, the reason why I no longer have an eating disorder, or at least part of the reason why I'm no longer addicted to exercise, is because I have this other thing that I'm like fully invested in. And you can't have like two fully invested things at the same time. So for me, this sounds really depressing. And whenever I tell my mom, she's like, that's awful. But I'm like, if I didn't have my work and I didn't have this purpose and I couldn't write and I couldn't coach and do all this stuff that like fills my soul, I tell her there's no point for me in living. And she's so depressing. But at the same time, I'm like, I think it's beautiful, because I think a lot of people in their life are just going through the motions, having no purpose, having no point. But for me, I have such a clear point, which is of course the Achilles heel. And I'm sure you relate. It's like, I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. But when you get so sucked into it and you realize like there's so much else going on that you could do and fun and play, but you don't have time for it because you have to do the client thing, then it's like, okay, well, what's the point of going this much into it? Because then we again wrap our identity in our work. But it's like, you're not you if you're wrapped up in something that isn't you.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the more that you are wrapped up into that, it is hard to like figure out what you even like. Like
Yeah.
for so long, I was doing the same thing all the time, eating the same things all the time, like to where I didn't even know, do I even like eating this or am I just doing it because I've been doing it for the last
Hmm.
5 years? And like I have foods even still to this day that I don't really eat a lot of anymore because I
Hmm.
just ate so much of it back then.
What are some
And so
examples? I'm just curious for you. Let's exchange sharing.
yeah, let's exchange our cringe food combinations. So it's not that bad, but I would put like egg whites in my oatmeal.
Oh, I did
Like
that
it's
all the
not
time.
terrible. Yeah.
I actually liked the taste of that,
Yeah.
but now, I mean, because now I put like protein powder in my oatmeal, and I've always done that, and I've always enjoyed that. Like, I
Yeah.
genuinely enjoy that. The cringe for me, and I have a whole scene about this in my book, is the freaking two massive ass bowls of airy protein fluff.
Oh, I thankfully like I never got into that because I was always afraid it was gonna make my stomach hurt.
Because it
Like,
does. It like,
yeah.
because
Because
it's
like
just
people would use
air.
like chewing gum and like all these like weird different
Yeah.
additives. And I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, I just feel like that's gonna make my stomach hurt. And so I
Yeah.
just never but I would make the little like mug cakes. And one time I did, I would heat up like Quest bars and like swear that I was eating cookies. And then one time, this is kind of gross. It was called like a sweet omelet or something.
Uh-huh.
Like it would be like cocoa powder in egg whites.
Oh my
So
God.
you
Mhm.
like a
Every
chocolate
single
chip
thing you've just mentioned, I've done. Yeah.
with like whipped cream on it. I mean, it was everything I ate was very like 2012 Instagram Fitspo on
Yes.
brand. Like that's
Yeah.
what I was eating. Like I remember they might have gone out of business, but there was this brand that sold protein like wraps and they were actually really good. It was called like P28. And did you
My
have
God. Oh my God. I cannot believe we're having this conversation. I loved their bagels.
I
And
love
then
their wrap.
I loved their bagels. And then, yeah, they disappeared. And I remember in like 2020, I was Googling what happened to Peach. I love
What?
this conversation so much. Oh my God.
But yeah, like all of those like weird like combos of food. I mean, like Halo Top, Arctic
Yep.
Zero, like
Uh-huh.
all old like gross ice creams. And trying to think of what else I would eat. I used to bring tuna packets with me in high school to class and eat them in class.
Oh, I don't like
And
tuna.
people
Um,
hated me for that because it stunk. And then I don't know, like I can't think off the top of my head.
I remember when I was on your podcast, you had told me that your mom had bought like an instant pot or a slow cooker or
Oh yeah, yeah,
something so you
yeah.
could make your chicken and broccoli.
Like I was
Yeah.
so obsessed. Like anything like I had to have like my routine. Like
Yep.
it was crazy.
Yeah.
But
No, for me too. Like every like breakfast was the protein oatmeal. I mean, I swear I put protein powder in everything. I had my mom buy like the special protein bread because I could only eat a sandwich if it was made with like flaxseed bread. Everything was egg whites, egg whites, egg whites, egg whites. The mug cake, the amount I had a whole protein bar drawer, and there were like over 200 bars in there. I would heat them up, like you said. On New Year's Eve in Holland, we have these they're called oliebollen, which basically means this sounds gross, but they're called literally translates to oily balls. But what it basically is, it's fried dough, but in like a ball form. So you have the ball of dough and then they dump it in the oil like fries, and then it's like this crisp. It's really good, especially if it's filled with like jam or chocolate. It's like a croissant kind of. But I remember because my mom was making cinnamon raisin oily fried dough, and every night I would like make my own. You know the Lara bars made with dates and nuts. I would make them myself because we were living in Europe at the time, and in Europe they don't have all the as much. Well, a lot more now, but like even 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, they did not have all the special protein wraps and bagel. There was like a few websites that had it, so I would make all of these things myself. So every night I'd make like the date nut bar things, and I remember New Year's Eve of like 2016, I made cinnamon raisin protein bars while they were eating the cinnamon raisin fried dough. I remember making it, and the whole time I was like, guys, I'm matching with you.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and it was like when I think back to those times, they would be like, "Yep, you're matching," and I would get so mad if they wouldn't like take it seriously. But when I look back, you realize how much you were living in like a full on delusion.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I would get so like, I would never eat like anything else anyone wanted to cook for me. Like, I was always stressed about how much oil and butter my mom used and
Yep.
stuff. And like, I'm in the South, so like, it's very normal to just like use heaps of that
Yeah.
stuff. And so, yeah, just like very high strung about everything. Like,
Mhm.
I remember one time I was out eating with some friends and I was in the middle of cutting for a weightlifting meet. So
Mhm.
for some context, but still my reaction was definitely not great. But I had like a diet soda and this other person had a full sugar soda and they swapped it with mine to
Like to
like
tease you?
yeah. And I tasted it and I was like, it's like this tastes like I just probably had like this impending doom in my face.
Yeah.
Not that that would even really matter. A sip of soda was not going to like affect my journey to like losing weight for this
Mhm.
meet. But like I remember like having a breakdown about it. Like I was like crying. But
Yeah.
that just shows how obsessed I was with like being perfect with how I tracked my food, all of the stuff. So like I definitely had like a terrible relationship with it for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that you shared that soda example because for me too, like, I didn't trust anyone to make my food. And I think, honestly, I think part of this is just due to the trauma of like, I know you haven't been diagnosed with an eating disorder and were never, so you didn't do all the treatments and stuff, but we did FBT, family based therapy, because I was so young when my eating disorder started. And the treatment approach was, the parents have to take over the food, and as you can imagine, there were a ton of these like online forums for parents dealing with kids who have eating disorders. And my mom would be on all these forums and they would be like, you have to sneak in like extra butter and oil into the rice and
Oh
stuff.
God.
But for super tasters and like highly sensitive people, like if you sneak in just like a pinch of butter into my rice, I will taste it. So for
Mhm.
me, a lot of the just distrust arose from, that like I couldn't trust them, and so like they couldn't cook anything for me, and every dinner, I would grill my chicken breasts like water. Like I remember like in the frying pan, instead of butter, use broth. And everything, it was always a light replacement. It was always a replacement. Like when baking, it was no oil but applesauce, no sugar but like the stevia drops and
Yeah.
everything. I mean, there's nothing wrong with stevia drops. Like I put them in my coffee every morning now. But it's again that word intention. Like if you are doing something for compassion and care for your body rather than out of fear, like you do you. But if you were petrified of like someone making something with too much oil, like that is not a sustainable way to go through life if you're constantly in this hyper vigilant state of, but is that made with too much oil? Is it made with this and this? And speaking of intention, I'd love to transition into weight loss and your thoughts on weight loss. Because before we started chatting, and even like months ago when we first chatted, for everyone listening, I told Ashleigh, I really want to talk about weight loss on this podcast because I think, especially when you have a history of dieting and an unhealthy relationship with food, I think there's this common like rule, unspoken rule of like, well, then you can never want to change your body. You can never want to lose weight because that would mean you're relapsing or spiraling back into old patterns. But I think that that is actually basically just giving your past continued power to influence you. If you're not allowed, quote unquote, to choose your own way now. So
Mhm.
I'd love for you to elaborate on, do you think or do you believe that people can lose weight in a way that's healthy, that is not rooted in fat phobia or all these other misconceptions or reasons people give for why anti-weight loss is the only way to be healthy?
Yeah, and I think, of course, I think that I don't know. I feel like all of these, I don't know if this is going to come across like in the wrong way to anyone listening, but like I feel like all of these words like fat phobia and like all of these words that are around now that weren't around a lot and a long time ago. Like, I don't know if they're helpful all the time because it just creates like a narrative about why people do the things that they're doing when like they have no, like if someone wants to lose weight, whether it's for vanity reasons or not, like they're not also saying like, hey, I hate you because you're fat. Like,
Yeah.
so like it just
Right.
puts like narratives in someone's mouth that like weren't there to begin with
Mhm.
or weren't thought of to begin with. Now, of course, like I think we can also take into consideration someone's history. So like if someone had an eating disorder when they were 20 and now they're 50 and they want to lose weight, yeah, that's an important thing to know because they might be more susceptible to certain things. And then you can kind of use that to guide whatever that you're doing. But I think it's fair to say, like, let's say someone had anorexia when they were 20, now they're 50 and they're obese. I don't think it's fair to say, no, you can't lose weight because you've never, or because you had an eating disorder.
Right.
Like, no, maybe it's probably healthy for you to lose weight if you are severely obese.
Just a
Oh,
side note, because I know that the word obese, there was a lot of thoughts about how obesity isn't really a thing because BMI is made up. So I do want to put a little, I guess, footnote. So the way to say it,
sure.
like, if you had anorexia when you were younger and you were suppressing your weight and you did like the diet and the yo-yo weight cycling or whatever that is, and your body has now adapted and feels safe enough in a BMI that is obese, so to say, but otherwise than that, you're perfectly healthy. Like that does not necessarily mean you have to lose weight. I think what Ashley's trying to say here is like if you are in a body that is actually not just quote unquote overweight, but there's also all these other health risks, and you just feel awful in your body and you want to change just to be able to move again and to do all these things that the weight has, I guess, taken away from you. That intention is rooted in care rather than the other reasons. I hope that kind of makes sense, but I just wanted to add that because I know that the word obese and obesity, there are a lot of people who have a lot of different thoughts on the use of that word because
Yeah.
of BMI and the problematic nature of that.
Yeah, yeah, BMI is awful. And if you're someone that like for example, because I come from like the CrossFit space, if
Mhm.
you looked at a lot of the CrossFit athletes and you actually put their information into a BMI calculator, a lot of them are actually classified like obese.
Yes,
I
like
guess
yeah, that's what I
I'm
was trying to get at is because
yeah.
I have a friend also who like if you look at her like she looks amazing in my opinion, but she has a lot of muscles and she's built with like strong heavy bones or however you say that. And
Yeah,
according to
yeah.
BMI, she's quote unquote obese. But if she tries to lose weight, she had an eating disorder and she knows if she tried to lose weight, she'd go back into that restriction awful mindset that isn't helpful for anyone. And before I let you talk again, I was a gymnast growing up, so weight is very important in that sense too. But so I had one friend who I swear she was so muscular, like to the point where it's like, how can someone naturally have that many muscles? Because we were like 12 and she was quote unquote obese. But I mean, it just was crazy because when she told us that, like, yeah, guys, I'm obese, I was like, what? Like that, this whole thing doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But, anyways.
Yeah, so I think all of those things can be taken into consideration. And again, it comes back to intention.
Mhm.
If because at the same time, if someone wants to lose weight, but they also have really bad body image or they have a lot of like emotional eating issues, like
Mhm.
the at that point, the weight is like not like the weight loss can happen and might need to happen for them,
Mhm.
but it's kind of like a secondary thing because
Yeah.
if they focus on improving their body image, if they focus on their emotional regulation to where they're not relying on food for that support,
Mhm.
they might naturally just lose weight anyway once those things are taken care of. So I
Yeah.
think it all has to do with like what the focus is. Like if you're
Mhm.
only focused on weight loss, but you're not focused on the other things, it might be really hard to lose weight because those other things might be holding you back. So I think it just depends. And then when it comes to tracking your food versus not tracking your food, again, it depends. Some people just don't tend to have a great relationship with that and they don't want to do it. And that's okay. several years ago, there was tons of people that lost weight without tracking food. I feel like tracking your macros was only very popularized, I would say. It started in the bodybuilding community, but like it hasn't been around that long, like it's not been super popularized for that long.
Yeah.
But it is a great way to manipulate your food if it doesn't trigger you into any like deeper negative patterns and habits and stuff. But yeah, it's all about intention. If you're doing it, I think what you said about like doing it with like compassion versus fear, I think if you were to use that question every time that you made a decision in life, game changer. Like, is this rooted in fear or is this rooted in like taking care of myself?
Yeah.
And you think to yourself that you would always make the right decision, but we don't always ask ourselves that,
No,
So
we ask ourselves, what does society want me to do? What should I do? What's good? What's bad? But we forget that all of these labels are totally made up and subjective. And something that I wanted to touch on a little bit, because you just brought it up, which reminded me, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about that, about like macros and calorie counting and tracking. I never specifically tracked macros because it was too overwhelming for me. I liked calorie counting because that was easy and you could apply it to anything. And I think, again, in the healing space or whatever we want to call it, there's this like unspoken rule once again that like if you want to heal your relationship with food, you have to throw out the scales, you have to delete the calorie counting apps. But it's like, again, that word intention, because I'm like, if you're using the scale and the app to restrict yourself, that's coming from fear. But what if you say, oh yeah, well, actually, I'm going to eat 10,000 calories. That's my goal because I want to gain weight and I want to heal my relationship with food. How can that be stemming from fear? And I think especially in autistic people who are very prone to, attaching numbers to things because it gives us, again, that something to hold on to, just like black and white thinking. It's not necessarily a bad thing if you're using it to work for you. And another thing you said that I thought was so powerful was you said, if we stop putting the focus on weight loss and instead about building those healthy, sustainable habits, and then you lose weight as a natural byproduct of that, well, that actually shows that your body wanted to lose that weight in the first place because you're finally taking care of it.
Yeah. And I also think too, I don't know if you've ever seen those shows on TV where it's like my like 600-pound life or whatever, like those ones where they have like the different reality people on there.
When I was in my eating disorder, I was obsessed with watching Biggest Loser. And I was obsessed with watching, I think it was like a YouTube series it was in the UK about how a really fat person and a really skinny person would switch diets. Do you know that one?
I feel like I may have heard about that on YouTube.
Oh my God. Yeah, if you just keep talking, I'm going to look it up in the meantime.
So in those shows, something that I would always notice, especially when they would bring like therapists in and doctors in to talk with them, a lot of people that are like not just obese by BMI, but like they're literally several 100 pounds of overweight.
Right.
There's usually a lot of like emotional distress there.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the food at that point. And so I think talking about weight loss, like when we say like, oh, it's just easy, like track your food, like, no, like there's a lot of like emotional, psychological intervention that people need. And then you could also get into like the whole food noise situation.
Yeah.
And also when someone is that obese, they like our bodies like homeostasis.
Yeah.
And when you are that obese and you have that much of just like excess
body fat, yeah.
Like excess body fat, like when you start to lose weight, your body sends you signals to like maintain homeostasis. So like you'll be hungry, you'll be thinking about food more. So if someone is 700 pounds trying to lose weight, first of all, they've got a long way to go. That's not like a short.
Yeah.
Just imagine them trying to lose weight. They're also having to fight thinking about food all the time. So it's just it's very hard. Like it's not as like, yes, it's simple, but it's also like, that doesn't mean that it's easy.
Right.
And they deal with a lot of that stuff. And I think a lot of judgment gets placed onto them, and that's not right either. So I also wanted to just like put that out there too, because when we talk about tracking food and we talk about weight loss, it can seem very just, oh, just do this and like this will magically just happen. But there's so much like emotional stuff that goes on too that makes things a lot harder.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, so I do want to be mindful of the time because I know you have to drive off to the airport soon. But I was wondering if there was anything else that I may have mentioned. Oh, we're going to talk about this that I completely has flown off my radar or that you feel you still want to mention. Yeah, and then we can kind of go from there.
I think we hit on a lot of good things. I think the biggest thing to just like reiterate is just the intention piece and the tracking piece, because you can do anything and it can become negative. Like money can be
Mm-hmm.
positive, it can be very evil for some people. And like with the scale, with tracking, I don't love the saying that people have where it's like, oh, just throw it out. Because like you, I also believe like then you're just literally giving it power. Like, wouldn't it make more sense to face it and make it become something that's neutral and not have power over you? Like, that would feel so much better than just throwing it away and avoiding it. Like, to me, that's an avoidant behavior and that's
Mm-hmm.
not empowering at all. So I just wanted to
No,
touch on that.
I love that you brought that up. And I'm actually looking something up because I wrote a book that's coming out this year. It's called How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery. And I have a chapter in that book titled, Should I Smash the Scale? And I kind of do a little backstory of what I talked about in my memoir about how I was given this like ultimatum in eating disorder treatment that I wasn't allowed to leave until I smashed the scale. But like the day I left treatment, I bought a new scale because I was like, no one can tell me what I do with the scale. And I talk about also like diet culture. And I think a lot of the time we blame diet culture for a lot of things. But I'm like, diet culture cannot steal anything from you unless you give it permission to have an influence on you. Like if diet culture says rice cakes are so bad, like don't eat rice cakes, or the opposite of whatever that is, and you're like, okay, well now I'm never gonna eat rice cakes. Like that's not your decision anymore. You're giving an external thing power to influence you. And what you just said about the skill is so precise because I think, and I'm just going to read this bit from my book because I'm like, there's no way that I could even match what I'm going to even try to say now. So I say, similar to how diet culture cannot really steal anything from you, the skill doesn't truly have power over you. In fact, it never did. It was the story you told yourself, the identity you became so immersed in that painted the picture of the scale as the villain. So then you smashed the scale to pieces. Is your misery now in pieces too? Perhaps for a short burst of time you felt elated, but because the scale itself was never the problem, you're left wondering why you're still struggling once you smash the scale. And it's that idea like the scale, smashing the scale does not release its power over you because that object isn't the problem, it's your mindset. And that's why this whole idea of shifting our mindset to come from fear and scarcity to love and compassion and abundance. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but when you approach life with this openness and this mindset of, I don't know anything, I'm here to learn and discover, it's like you become that little kid again that just wants to play and learn and be curious. And I think, especially people like us, we have such a strong, ferocious inner child. And that's why we're always asking, okay, but why? I need to know why. And
Yeah.
I think the trap of getting older is that for so many people, it's like you just accept things the way they are. Why? Why do we have to accept things the way they are? We don't have to. And I think there's incredible power in that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just like I don't know, like being like a child versus an adult. I've always had like these thoughts where I'm like, why do people just I've always had this thought where I'm like, I feel like people just like do things because like that's what adults do as they get older.
Yep.
And I feel like they don't put thought into it. And I'm over here and I'm like putting like so much thought into everything. And
Yeah.
they're just like, oh, this is what we do because we're old now. But I wanted to also say about the like the stories we tell ourselves and just like the diet culture thoughts. Something that I have been trying to have more of recently is just like that this idea of strong opinions loosely held, because I can be someone where I can get very passionate and argumentative about certain things, and I've noticed that that comes from fear of not being like correct or not
Mhm.
being right about something.
Mhm.
And but the reality is like I don't know everything anyway. So it
Yeah.
comes from like it comes from like a very high strung, sensitive feeling. And I don't like how that feels. But when you can be just more open and curious about things, it's more relaxing.
Yep.
And I'm trying to be more relaxed. So like I'm trying to embody more of the like I have strong opinions, but I'm not gonna how do they say that? Like come at your throat. Like if there's some sort of like disagreement or if there's like this new idea, it's like, like just be curious about it.
Oh my God.
Kind of off topic.
Not off topic at all. I mean, I love that you just used that word. I feel like we could talk for like 500 hours because I started my group coaching program last week, and the first call, like in the first 5 minutes, I say the entire like program is about replacing judgment with curiosity. Like that is at the heart of not only healing from an eating disorder, but it's about the heart of living a purposeful life is when you replace judgment with curiosity, because then you open yourself up to discovering what aligns with you, what doesn't align with you. And then you get to pick and choose and mix and match how you want to create yourself. But you can't create yourself if you've already judged yourself as what you are not through these external identities, right? So yeah, I mean, beautiful note to wrap up on. Before we do hit stop recording, do you want to share where everyone can find you or get in touch if they want to learn more about Ashleigh Marie Hubbard?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at Ashleigh Marie Hubbard. I spell my name differently, so you can find that in her show notes, I assume.
Yeah.
My business is called Ahub Nutrition, and that is just ahubnutrition.com. I also have a podcast that I've had Livia on mine as well, so you can listen to our episode there. It's called The Wellness Diaries. And yes, that's a spin-off The Vampire Diaries, if you've ever watched that series.
I used to watch.
So you can find me there. I love talking to people. So if you have any questions, you can always send me a DM.
Cool. Well, yeah, I will definitely put everything in the show notes because she has a very eloquent spelling of her name, Ashleigh, which I love because I'm sure people always get it wrong when they spell your name at Starbucks or something. Because I know you go to Starbucks all the time. Because with me, whenever it's Livia, it's either Livia with a Y, or it's Olivia. It's never right. So, okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Ashleigh, and sharing your wisdom and insights. This has been a true delight. And everyone else listening, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Bye-bye for now.
Baby, just one foot in front of the other.